Morning. Did you love that song? Be strong. Take heart. Sometimes I don't always feel strong, but I can take heart. What a great week, great month. So many crazy things have been happening. You know, it seems like State Fair was so far long ago. We had all the moves, and we're not done. We got one more move to go. Then we had the wedding last weekend, which was like a Chicago reunion. You know, those a number of years that we were there were people from all over the place, LA and New York coming on in. It was awesome. And then, of course, we had 2 funerals on Friday. And it's like there's so many things going on, it's hard to get running. I don't know if you felt that way. By the way, the Disciples Latin Ministry in Chicago send their love. Then, of course, my daughter's pregnant. You couldn't tell she was glowing. She was glowing. And then, of course, today is a birthday party for me. And yes, I'm turning 60. I know. Doesn't seem like that. Yes. I think of myself more like 35. I don't physically feel that way, but that's how I view it. You know, Barb and I went to the State Fair park, or State Fair thing, and we walking up to it, and there was a thing up there for seniors. And of course, regular admission is $12, seniors was $8. And we're like, let's ask. And Barb's like, he's gonna be 16 in a week or something, so I'll let him in. Yeah! See, there's a benefit here. And now I'm starting to look at menus. You can get it cheaper here. Yeah. Senior sections and stuff, and there's a good deal in that. But there's just something not good about saying you're a senior citizen. It doesn't. You know, it's all about perspective. The oldest guy in the Bible, Methuselah, how old was he? 969 years old. I don't want to live that old. Now, what I really can't wrap my head around is that his first child was when he was 187. I can't even visualize that. In a span of eternity, 60 years is nothing. You know, the other day, there was a guy, one of the brothers here, I won't mention his name, basically said, describing someone, he's an older guy, he's like in his 40s. And I'm like, no, he's a younger guy, he's in his 40s. And it's all about perspective. You know what I mean? Well, we were we were on our way to the wedding. I got pulled over by a cop. I know. And he said, do you know why I'm pulling you over? I said, no. And he said, did you see the sign, the stop sign back there? And I said, I don't remember. And he gave me the license. He said, okay. Move on. It was sad. I think he felt bad for me. He's like, geez. You know, all right, now I'm going to share this with you. I want you to remember this sermon when you're 60. Okay, so when I was in high school, the calculator came out. And people are like, well, what did they use before that? An abacus or one of those things? No, they had a slide rule. You guys know what a slide rule is? Okay, I'm going to read something to you. This was in my senior yearbook. It starts off, the computer. It says the math department of Promontory, which was the name of my high school, has once again been modernized. This time by the addition of a teletype terminal hooked up to a shared time computer at UWGB. The computer, located in the Resource Center, is used primarily for programming and math classes, but has also been put in use in the history and language departments. The terminal is an experiment on the part of Promontory and UWGB to see whether a computer could be used effectively in a high school. If successful, it could become a permanent part of our high school. Oh, we're moving right along. All right, I bring that up to say, what's going to happen when you're my age? Your kids are going to say, Dad, what's an iPhone? I've heard of those. What does the I mean in iPhone? iPhone? What is this thing? You know? And it's amazing. It's about perspective. Imagine Tracy's future child. Life expectancy, they say, is going to be over 100 years. So imagine 2120 living that long. As fast as we're advancing, and people look at you like you're archaic. What was that like? I realized, think about it, people change in the way they think. Societies change, right? A lot of things change. You know, we have these 2 funerals, and it makes you think about life and death and all that, but it makes you also realize that the heart of man never changes. I want you to think about that. The heart of man is still all into greed, sexual sin, anger, bitterness, unforgiveness. And life goes on, but those things remain. And there's a progression. You know, I think about, once again, the music industry. When I was a kid, we had albums. And then they went from albums to 8-track players. Yeah, 8-tracks. Then they went from that to cassettes, which we thought would never end. And then CDs. And now it's in the cloud. Is that God or what? I don't know. So with our hearts, the answer is always the same in the Bible. Look in Galatians chapter 5. The answer is always the same. It's faith and love. Galatians 5, verse 6. Now, this book was written by Paul, and he was kind of stern in this book. He had some issues. Why? Because a lot of people they were giving in to sin, but they're also trying to promote a new doctrine. And the Jewish faith was, those who were Jews who became Christians were trying to pull in Jewish doctrine into Christianity. And Paul gets a little heated. And this is what he says, and specifically it was circumcision. Chapter 5, starting in verse 6. It says, for in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. According to the Bible, that's all that matters to God. Faith expressing itself through love. And people get caught up in all sorts of works and doctrine and stuff like that. And God's saying, listen, you got to understand these 2 basic principles. So what does he mean? Look in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. And this is the great chapter on faith. In verse 1, it says, now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks even though he is dead. What does all that mean? He begins by defining what faith is. Faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. Does that define you? And you say that about your faith. Well, we're going to talk about that. He talks a little bit about two different types of faith. There's the intellectual faith. He says, by faith we understand that the universe was created by God. And that's just something that we tend to just take for granted. All right? But then he talks about Abel's faith. And it says, by faith Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. All right? And so what's he saying is that there's a faith that is seen. It's an action. And that's what, the title of the lesson is, faith expressing itself through love. In other words, expressing is action. There is a reaction to what you believe. You act on it, and people see it. The challenging question is, what do people see in your life? Because that's what your faith is. That is what you believe. All right, let's look down in verse 7. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Okay, it says Noah, this dude, in holy fear, built this ark. How long did it take him to build the ark? Over 100 years. Took him out, 100 years building this thing. That takes a lot of faith. And what motivated him? Holy fear. But it's what he believed. He envisioned the destruction of the world. That people were going to die, and that he was going to die, because God said it. It's not like he could read it in the Bible. They didn't have the Bible, but he believed God. And you imagine the persecution he got for 100 years. What is this thing? This thing is really big. What are you doing? There's going to be destruction on that. Doesn't he sound like a crazed dude? What are you talking about? You're going to put what? All sorts of animals on this thing? Are you kidding me? You're Looney Tunes. And yet it didn't stop him because he believed. There was an action that went along with what he believed. It should be the same for us. People should see our love. Why? Because that's our faith. Our faith expressing love. All right? Look at Acts chapter 4. Now, for us, the same thing is true. It says that through Noah's faith, he condemned the world. And what's that saying? It's saying that what he believed basically communicated to people that you're going to die. And you're going to die through a flood. And our faith, our actions will communicate a lot to a lot of people. Let's look at an example. Let's look at Peter, Acts chapter 4, starting in verse 8. Now, just before we read into this, we're finding out that Peter just healed a cripple. And the Pharisees didn't like it. They were ticked off because they're preaching Jesus. And they hated it because they're getting all the attention. And so instead of being fired up that he healed a cripple, they're more focused on how they look. Verse 8, then Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, rulers and elders of the people, if we are being called to account today for an act of kindness shown to a cripple and are asked how he was healed, then know this, you and all the people of Israel, it is by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, but whom God raised from the dead, that this man stands before you healed. He is the stone you builders rejected, which has become the capstone. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. All right. Of course, they weren't happy with all that. Peter's basically saying you killed the Messiah, the man that you've been waiting for thousands of years. And you're more ticked off that I healed this cripple. Hey, you got bigger problems, because there's no other name under heaven through which men might be saved. In other words, he was challenging their salvation. He's saying, you're lost. And for us, when we hold to the scriptures, or we challenge people to hold to the scriptures, we too are guilty by association. What do I mean? In other words, our faith is saying that there's going to be a lot of people who are lost. They're not going to make it to heaven. And people will hate you for it. But truth is truth. Now, you may be saying, hey, I don't agree with that. Well, either this is true or it's a lie. And here you got one of the pillars of the church, Peter, Jesus' right-hand guy, one of the inner circle guys, laying out a doctrine. He's saying it's only through the name of Jesus that you can be saved. And there's a lot of people who just want everybody to be, oh, let's just hug each other and love each other. Well, that's not what you read here. And your faith will condemn. Because if you're saying, well, I don't agree with that, well, then what else in the Bible do you not agree with? Then what is your standard? What are you going to hold to the forefront? In other words, you got to make a decision. Either this is true or it's not. And if it's true, then it's got to become who we are. And what that means is that our faith needs to be expressed by our love. Question is, what is your faith? What do you really believe? What does it come down to? Now, we looked at the title of the lesson, Faith Expressing Itself Through Love, but our faith can express a lot of other things, a lot of bad things. Throughout history, you have a lot of leaders who believed in things that were very ungodly, that destroyed people. You can look at Hitler as an example. Hitler believed that the Aryan race was the perfect race. And not only did he believe it, he got whole of Germany to believe it. And that faith became action. And a lot of people died because of what he believed in. That's pretty amazing. And the question is, what kind of ripple effect do we have with our faith? The amount of people that we could rescue and help if we really believed. I remember a few years ago, I was in a Bible talk, and I was doing the Bible talk, and it was in the basement of this couple's house, and there was a little window here, and you could see up above, and it was one of these things that held stuff, and a toad jumped in this thing. All right? And the gal who was sitting next to me caught the toad up, just saw it out of it, and she freaked. She jumped up and screamed and ran. Just, ran. The guy next to him did the exact same thing. Everybody's screaming. I'm like, what's going on? And it was amazing to me because of her fear, which was a result of what she believed was going on. She impacted the whole group. I was like, what did I just say? But it's amazing how easily it is to get people to react. And a lot of times you don't realize it because of where our faith is at. We don't really impact people because of our lack of faith. How strong is your faith? People will see it. I can tell by your lifestyle. And I can tell by the people you influence. Does your faith express itself through love? Look in Titus chapter 1. We're getting deep today. Titus chapter 1. Now, Paul's writing Titus, and he's saying, hey, you got to go into these areas and fix things up because they're a mess. And so that's what the whole book of Titus is all about. But he hits on something that we can truly learn about here in this area. Titus chapter 1, verse 15. It says, to the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted. They claim to know God, but by their actions, they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. A little heated here. But he says some concepts that we got to grab. He says, starts off, to the pure, all things are pure. And he's basically saying that our minds, which is where our faith is at, can get corrupted. And it's not hard to do. We live in a world where your mind can go and get corrupted very quickly, very easily. And it's a battle to keep your mind pure. Am I right? Yeah, there's all sorts of temptation. People will do stuff, and it'll cause your mind to go to evil places. But he says, to the pure, all things are pure. Where do your thoughts lead you? Do your thoughts lead you to criticalness? Do you dwell on sin? Are you critical? Or are you faithful, positive, upbeat, powerful because you believe? And see, we can begin that way and then slowly get corrupted again. And it's hard to watch people's minds get corrupted. I remember our daughters when they were just little, and it was so much fun because you would teach them and they believed, and they would talk about God, and they would pray and all these things, and it was just awesome. They'd share their faith. And then the biggest fear was sending them off to school, because you knew that their minds would start getting corrupted. And it's a sad thing to watch, because they'd come home and you're like, where did you ever hear that? Where did that come from? Well, you know where it's coming from. And slowly the corruption happens. And we've all gone through that, and then eventually become teens, and my stars. Then you just got to get on your knees. But then they've got to decide what they want to do. You know, unfortunately for us, you know, Tracy and Candace here, they both saw that the world isn't worth it, that there's a corruption on it. And they could look at the church and they say, hey, you know, there's problems there, but for the most part, those people love me. And they saw the expressions of love. And the question is, hey, is that what we as a church is doing for others? Do people see us loving each other, and are there expressions of love that we do? Is it obvious in your life? Do people see it, or is your mind getting corrupted? We're not a perfect church. And the reason why is because you're in it. And I'm in it. All right? People need to see the love. Point number 2, expressions of love. Why is this an issue of faith? Well, I think number one, it's such a rare thing. It's hard to, people don't really see that kind of love, and then they don't trust it. Why are you acting this way? You want. I know what you want. You want something. Maybe it's in the contribution. You want me to give money. I don't know. But it's hard for us to do. It's hard for us to believe that if we keep loving people, they will change. Because you got to suffer for them. You got to pour time and energy and effort. Think about your conversion. What did it take to get you there? A lot of prayer. A lot of pulling teeth to get you there. You know, and we got some good stories here. We can go on and on and on. It takes time, it takes energy and suffering to get people to really love God. Why? Because people have been damaged. They've been hurt. They don't trust. They don't believe it's possible that you, a stranger, would actually love them. What's in it for you? Well, somebody did it for me, namely Jesus, and people just getting in my lives and rescuing me. And so a lot of it is just getting them to believe too, to have faith. And once they do, they turn. It's amazing. It's awesome. And then they start serving. They start giving. Why? Because of gratitude. Not because of the law that they have to, but because they can't help but do it. Have you lost that faith? Look at Matthew chapter 9. Now I'm going to hit on something that could be a little touchy. Yeah. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. Matthew's first book of the New Testament. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." This is one of the reasons people hated Jesus, because he was so convicting. Well, what is Matthew? He's a tax collector. These guys were hated. Why? Because they were traitors. They basically were working for the Romans to extract your money. It's nothing worse than having people just take your money. And the Romans owned you. You were their slaves. And this guy was working for them. So they hated him. And basically, Jesus comes up to him and says, "Follow me." And he drops everything and he does it. And I don't know what really was going on in Matthew's life, how much he knew about Jesus, but he follows Jesus, becomes an apostle. And you notice here that the Pharisees and these people are going not to Jesus, they're going to Jesus' disciples. You notice it? Verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why aren't they going to Jesus? I think they're just scared of the guy. But Jesus jumps on the opportunity and goes right for the jugular. And he says, hey, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. In other words, why aren't you guys trying to rescue these people? Why are you just hanging around, you religious people? And see, a lot of times people don't want to associate with people that they deem sinners. Oof. I don't want to be seen with that person. What would someone think? Well, that is not faith expressing itself through love. What Jesus did was radical here. He went to a party. He went to a party with non-Christians. Why? Because he knew he could turn them. And he went there out of love, knowing that people would think all sorts of crazy things about him. And he says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor. It's those who are sick. And who's sick? Everybody. Everybody needs Jesus. But they didn't see that. And see, for our society, this is big. People don't want to associate with other people for fear of what other people will think. Love doesn't care. Love says, I don't worry what people think. I'm in it for you because God did it for me. And it's the willingness to walk past through that line, that what culture has set, that dictates a lot and communicates a lot about who you are. The question is, do you allow society to dictate your faith and what you do, or does God? Well, I can tell by what you do. This is a huge issue in Milwaukee. This is a very racial city. And it's wrong. It's sin. And people don't know how to deal with it. I've talked to a lot of religious people who say, well, we're going to call a white church, call a black church and invite them over so we can, start something. It's like, no, that's a Band-Aid, buddy. There's a deeper issue here. The issue is your heart. All right? I want to demonstrate this today. I want Shane to stand up. Shane. Now, there's a difference between Shane and I. Other than I'm better looking than him. Tracy. Wow. Okay, we're going to have to talk afterwards. Maybe I shouldn't do, maybe I'm going to, no. Anyways. Yeah, there's a difference. He's taller than I am. Yeah, okay. He likes basketball. Okay. But there's a cultural difference here. It's huge. Now, if you haven't noticed, he married a white woman, my daughter. Now, I have absolutely no problem with this. I never did. Never have. Okay? A lot of my best friends are Latino, Black, Asian, and all the in-between. But it cannot, but you can sit down. It cannot be, we get along awesome. There isn't any issues. And I'm sure Shane will tell you he's never felt that. But our society has a hard time with that. I used to have a hard time with all sorts of issues. For me, it wasn't as much as race as it was wealth. I really looked down on wealthy people because they treated me a certain way. We all have our issues, but what's your faith? Do you see beyond it? If you don't, you have a problem with your faith. And people in this society, in Milwaukee, need to understand a different part of Christianity. It cannot be divided. Love will conquer this stuff. I can't be afraid of what other people think of my son-in-law, my family. Now, my family, northern Wisconsin, there's no relationships with Black people up there. And so, in my mind, I had to realize this may be an issue. And it hasn't been, praise God, but it could have been. And the challenging thing is, if it is in our hearts, people will feel it. They will respond to it. I remember having a conversation with Shane where he's had issues because he is married to a white woman. People have given him a hard time about it. That's reality. Cannot be. Are you understand what I'm saying? This is what this passage is all about. It doesn't matter. There's a friend of mine that went to jail a number of years ago and did some stupid things, and he went to jail. And that's a stain that will never, ever leave him. And I remember having a conversation, and he's like, Jay, I just feel like I'm afraid to be seen with like you and other people see us together, what they'll think. And I said, I'm not afraid. It doesn't bother me. I don't think I'm better than you. My question is, are you afraid to be associated with me? And see, really, that's what it comes down to. People have these fears. And people will have a problem with even going to church because there's a stigma on them. We got to help people in their faith to get them over the humps to get healed. Because that's what Jesus was all about. Is your faith corrupted? The world did that. Little kids play together, they don't know. They don't know anything. The world corrupts them. And we've got to bring them back to purity, because to the pure, all things are pure. Make sense? All right, let's look at John 21. Another example of this. John chapter 21, verse 15. Okay, here's the scoop. Jesus has died. He's been buried. And he's resurrected. But here's the problem. He has to reinstate his guys because they have failed him. And they're feeling heavy about it. They're feeling like they blew it. And he has this conversation with Peter. Peter blew it. He denied he even knew Jesus 3 times. And what does he do? He goes back to fishing. And that's what he does just prior to this passage. He's fishing. Look in verse 15, John 21, verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Wow, there's a lot going on here. Understanding once again that Peter had betrayed Jesus, went back to his old life. And that's what happens when we get corrupted. We will go back to our old life. And why? Because that's all we know. And Jesus has to call Peter out of it. And that's what he means when he says, do you truly love me more than these? Meaning his lifestyle. And he says, yes, you know I love you. And then he says, then feed my lambs, feed my sheep. And see, this is where he's saying, listen, I know your faith has been damaged, but you need to re-engage. And your faith needs to be expressed in love by loving my children, taking care of my children. Can you do this? And he asked them 3 times because it wasn't a flippant thing. It's a big deal. You're my guy. What are you going to do? Are you going to run again? And remember, he keeps calling him Simon. That was his name before. He's saying, you're Simon. Are you going to be Peter? Are you going to be the rock? And you can just imagine Peter's thinking. And then at the end of it, he says, listen, this is how you're going to die. You're going to die on a cross. That's your future. Now remember, you ran before because you saw what was happening to me. What are you going to do? Where's your faith at now? This is a heavy talk. You know, imagine Jesus saying to Victor, okay, just so you know, Victor, you're going to be tortured to death and die on a cross. You know that. What are you going to do? You going to be fired up about that? Are you going to leave? You're going to run? What are you going to do? Or is your faith such that you're going to give to my children who need help? Are you with me? And this is the call of Christianity. Because there's a lot of needs out there, right? Don't allow your faith to get corrupted. Don't play with sin, because that's what will happen. Satan will take you out and everybody else you could have helped because you gave in to sin. And I've seen it time and time again. We had a brother recently leave, and he sent me a text yesterday. And he said, Jay, you're right. I was wrong. And I blew it. And I'm sorry. And please tell everybody else I'm sorry. But I'm not coming back. I was just like, wow. This guy is willing to believe a lie that his life will be better without this. Satan knew how to take him out. He knows how to take you out. You got to have great faith because Satan's going to come after you. Jesus saying to Peter, you're going to suffer. You got to want this. And the question is Jesus worth it to you? Is it his children worth it? Jesus saying, show me your love. Show it to me. Don't just say you love me. Show me. Feed my sheep. And that's really what it comes down to. The Bible says nothing else matters. That's what it says in Galatians in the beginning there where we read it. Do you believe in his cause? Then show it. You know, I want to hold up Tim and Lynn Hallmark. They have a tremendous amount of expressions of love. It's amazing to me. I'll hear stories. I won't know that they're doing things, and I'll find out through the grapevine. And it's everything you can think of. You know, one day I heard that they filled the single brothers' refrigerator with food. That was great. They took this passage literally, feed my sheep. Then I heard that Tim was helping Christy drive. Now there is an act of faith, right? You know, giving rides to people, just helping people out. Are you feeding his sheep? I'm going to close with a question. How is your faith expressing itself? What is the result of what you believe? Galatians 5:6 says it's the only thing that counts. Faith expressing itself through love. Seriously, how is your faith expressing itself through love? I want you to write it down. I want you to study this out. I want you to be able to answer that. What does my life show? If you have a hard time answering that, then you're in a bad situation. Your mind is getting corrupted because it's not expressing itself in love. God says it's the only thing that counts. You know the two greatest commandments, right? Love God, love people. And God keeps drilling this into our heads. But we're selfish people. And we got a lot of work to do, guys. We need to get past selfishness. We got to get our minds purified. And we got to express God's love by feeding his sheep. Amen? Thank you.